Alright, it's time for the Protoss Starter Guide. We're going to be talking about the very basics of Protoss. Before we even jump into it, of course, ideally you've played at least 5 or 10 games versus the AI. You got a general idea. You've done a tutorial, maybe some campaign missions. Nothing crazy, maybe even a few ranked games, and of course this will still apply silver, gold, and maybe even to platinum. But we're going to be worrying about just a solid Protoss build. What all the important things to worry about are, whether they are super pylons and pylons. If you don't know what those are, we're going to explain it. How to defend early on, how to place your buildings so they don't screw you over, they screw over your opponents, and in general, what units you should be making to minimize your actions per minute, because that, if you let your Terran and Zerg friends tell you, is what Protoss is all about. So we're just going to jump in. I don't think reading a Prima strategy guide or any sort of anything else, essentially, is a substitute for the real thing. So right now, I pretty much have default hotkeys. I have a few changes I like to make to mine when it comes to camera location hotkeys. Thank you, Bobo. But Control F2 through F5, I have a camera location guide as well. That's a little separate. But I use those for my bases, is the summary. I put my camera location so I can jump to them on my bases. But when we get in, first off, what race we're against does kind of matter for Protoss. The other races, especially like Terran, you can just wall off the front. But as Protoss against a Zerg player, you want to wall off the front. Against the other races, you want to protect your mineral lines. So getting in, we're up against Protoss. My first thing I need to do, I'm going to go up to 14 supply and make a pylon.
Yes,
yes. Enough.
Just as I deserve.
Alright. Terran guide's already up there. But my first pylon is going to be pretty close to my mineral line, somewhere in this area, around your gas geyser. Now, what's important is not having the pylon here now, it's having the pylon here later. In an area where you can build a shield battery, you can warp in units. Now, I'm going to build my gateway right off the bat after this. Gateway, pylon, gateway, still making probes, and I'm going to sink one chrono boost. That chrono boost works real fast, so just keep building the probes. I'm going to sink one chrono boost into the probes, and then on 17 supply, we're going to get a gas geyser. I sent my first probe to scout. I hotkeyed it on 3 there. I like to have it on a different hotkey. I don't like to send my first probe off right off the bat, because then you'll get distracted with it. There's nothing you can see really early. When I get into his base, all I want to find out is, does he have any way of doing damage to me early? And if he doesn't, I'm not worried. So I got this gas geyser. We're going to put 3 in there. As the gas is finishing, I'm going to get a second one. And as soon as that gateway finishes, I'm going to get a cybernetics core. Alright, we see he's got 1 gateway. His cyber core is later. He built a second pylon already, which means he's already spent more money than I have on buildings that can't attack. Pylons, since the removal of the mothership core, if you remember what that was, cannot attack. So right now, that means he doesn't have anything that can attack me. I don't have anything that can attack him, so I'm just building probes. You're going to get a lot further building probes than trying to figure out how to counter what your opponent is doing. I don't really care about much what he's doing. I'm going to get a Nexus, because I'm safe. Now, you're not always safe. If you're not safe, then you might need to build a few units early, but I'm going to get Warp Gate immediately. That's very important. And I'm going to check back in his base here. You won't always get away with that. But he has only 1 gas geyser, which means he doesn't have access to any real big tech. And let's go for a Stargate. Stargate's pretty fun early on. He's got a Zealot to chase me. I made this Stalker first, and I'm still making probes. That's the big one. Gonna use the Shift hotkey to add my second Nexus into the control group. But right now, as I'm getting my next pylon, I don't want to have too many pylons. I'm at 27 over 31 supply. And notice if you hover over your supply, you can see how many workers you have. That's also very important. I'm going to bring this Stalker down here, make sure it's on the hotkey. But hovering over supply to see workers is really important to be able to do. I'm not being very diligent about the probes either. But early on, as soon as this pylon finishes down here, I'm going to make a shield battery at the front. Now, against the other races, I'm sure we'll play against the other races, thank you. you want to make maybe, like against Zerg, maybe you make a shield battery and you have a wall or something like that. It's very important to wall off. But we have a big tech building, so I can just sink my Chrono Boost into making that Void Ray. Oh, there's a probe back here. I'm gonna send this probe back in to see if he's expanded. And right now, I need to spend my money, so I'm gonna make a couple more gates. So now it's time to talk about super pylons. Here you see a pylon with a nice strong power field. This pylon with a weaker one. Now why? What's the difference between this pylon and that pylon? These pylons are super pylons. A super pylon is a pylon within a power radius of a nexus or of a warp gate. Not just a gateway, but a warp gate. So you have to have warp gate done.
Time for a timing push.
But, so at a super pylon, you warp in 3 times as fast. I guess I'll show you right now. At a non-super pylon, you warp in very slowly. I'm gonna Chrono Boost out the gateway to demonstrate here. You see, by the time this finishes, units could already be by. So it's important to have at least a few of those out there. Ideally, you have every pylon, at least 2 or 3 super pylons, so you're safe. Now, we're getting closer to 5 or 6 minutes into the game, so I want to have detection. I probably should have, if I'm really scared of things like Dark Templar, I'm building a robotics facility a lot earlier. Because DTs can get into your base, they're cloaked units, and if you don't have detection, obviously you can't see them. I'm just going to warp in a couple sentries because I have a lot of gas. I want to get my forge. A good rule. Now, you don't always have to open up Stargate. In fact, I don't necessarily think it's better. I just decided to open up Stargate. I think if you really want to play it safe, you get a robotics, and then you get a Twilight Council, and then by the 6-minute mark, you want to be making a forge. But I'm still making probes. A good goal to have is make 50 probes by 8 minutes. It might seem real easy. I'm already at 42 probes. You'll be surprised at how often you fall behind on that. Okay, calm down, Day 9. I don't watch your dailies anymore. Maybe I should. Alright, and as soon as that forge finishes, I'm gonna go ahead. Now, another thing I should have done to be safe earlier, and if you want to be safe, by 4 minutes, making a shield battery in the mineral line. The shield battery heals the shields automatically of units around it, including probes. Thank you very much. Oh, looks like he had an observer over me. But the shield battery heals units around it, including probes. If oracles come in, if adepts come in, I mean, there are ways around it. But having a shield battery against every race in your mineral line, they're cheap as dirt. Essentially, they're cheaper than dirt. Alright, they're as cheap as your mother. It's 75 minerals, maybe it'll be 100 in another patch, but they're cheap, and they only cost minerals. So if you don't feel safe, you can build more shield batteries. Of course, that's no support for constructing additional pylons.
Do what I do. Build 4 pylons.
I'm gonna build now. If you want an A-move army, Immortals, Stalkers, Charge Lots, and Archons. Now, I want to see what he's doing. It's good to get information. You should really try to be getting information every minute. I kept sending that probe in. I'm sending a hallucinated Phoenix across. I'm intentionally playing a little bit slower to be able to explain everything, but ideally over time you speed up, and all these things are happening way quicker. It takes time. I started in the Silver League. Alright, don't complain to me. I was in the Silver League for most of a season, and that season was like 6 months long, and I was playing all day and definitely neglecting my final year of high school. So I don't recommend that build. I don't do that. Be more efficient. That's why you're here, right? My first upgrade finished. And a good thing, if you have full Chrono Boost like I do, just put in your upgrades. That's a great place to put it. Alright, he has an observer out here. Let's back off. I'm going to put Stalkers out, but I'm going for another base. And really, by this point, I should be adding on more gateways. If you have money, you shouldn't be looking to make a bunch of cannons, maybe a couple cannons. Maybe get some detection in the main base or something like that. And you gotta be careful, you gotta be careful where you put your shield batteries and your cannons. You can put them, and you should put them in the mineral line, at least close to it. But you want to be careful that your probes aren't walled off there too. That's very important. But Gonna get the Templar archives now. I have so much gas. I really should have more pylons in my main. But my job is to make sure he doesn't move out and try to kill me without me realizing it. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm getting this base up. We're at 67 probes. If you get to 67 probes, you're doing great. You're doing great. Now, it's okay. You can watch my guide on mining and economy. It's all right to have 17, 18 probes out of 16. It will still help you. You'll still get more income. It's not hurting you. All right. Of course, it's better to have probes mining on this fresh base where they all get their own mineral patches to work with. That's much better. All right, let's get the charge. Let's chrono boost this out. We've got the Templar archives. And I'm warping in more gateways into warp gates. And sure, that's a lot of gateways. But like 11, 12 gates, sure, whatever, fine. It's about getting that army. And I'm getting the Templar to move into Archons. I'm going to get another observer. This one's at the front. We're going to morph those into Archons, and we're going to bring them in with the army. Let's chrono boost another upgrade. I mean, at this point, I might as well have a second forge, right? Like, I have plenty of money. And by plenty of money, I mean over 500. If you can go almost up to max supply and keep your money below 1,000, and get your upgrades, and build your probes, I know it's starting to stack up here. And you can do that, you're in great shape. Alright, building this type of army. I mean, Storm is a good upgrade, and I built a Warp Prism. A Warp Prism is really important to have as the game goes on, because the Warp Prism allows you, it's essentially a flying pylon. You can warp in a ton of units, you can drop units too if you're into that. But if you get it into the back of the base at the right time, it can just win the game for you. He's looking around with this. But I'm still making Archons are super good. The only thing I gotta be careful of is they're super clunky as well. They have trouble getting around. So you don't want to fight with your Archons into a ramp or something like that. You want to have space. You want to have space to grow. You want to spread out because they have very short range, but they have a lot of damage, and they soak a lot of damage. They have a ton of shields. Okay, I used the Hallucinated Phoenix to see what he has here. He's just now getting a Templar Archives. We click on the units we see as 1-1 upgrades. I'm doing better. I've got idle probes over here. Can hotkey in this Nexus. I could chrono for days. Just chrono those upgrades. Okay, here's the plan. I want to try to get that main army in. Now, it's going to be real clunky. It's going to be real clunky. But, and I mean, before I go in to move out, let's make sure I have all this set up. How many probes? 74 probes. That's fine. Let's bring an observer here. And what I want to do, I'm going to warp in a bunch of zealots in the main base right as I try to attack into the second. Now, this map is real defensive. So what I could do, if I can't break them, I don't just keep trying to bang my head against a ramp. I'm going to get a fleet beacon and more Stargates. Remember, I already built that Stargate earlier. But eventually, you get to go to carriers, is the summary. If he's really just not budging and he's sticking back on his bases and you can't break them, don't sacrifice your army. Just work your way to carriers. I have 4 bases now. He has 3. And that base in the back doesn't actually have that many mineral patches. So I'm going to go for the 1-2 punch. We're going to warp in a bunch of zealots here. Oh, his army's out of position. It's at the front. I had that hotkey. So I just moved back. All right, he gets to move out. And you know what I wanted? I wanted to fight him out here. I got room for activities. I'm going to use the Guardian Shields on the sentries. Always important to have a couple of those. And, I mean, if your back's up against these fancy little squares here, I'm going to have a good day. And these zealots in the main at the same time, they're going to have a good day. Everybody's having a good day. But you wait for the opportunity. Protoss is very easy to take a real strong army and make it real weak. But I had my control group, and that's important to do. Use the rewind game feature. After F10 for your menu, and then, well, you can just press the W button when the victory screen comes up. Or if you're defeated and you want to go back to the replay, just F10 and W. You left the game, but you can go to the replay. And I think it's important to be able to do so. And we're just going to talk a little bit about going over replays. The very, very basics. All right. So I'm going to look at me right now. Kappa Ross. But I'm going to look at me. So what I want to do is every time I'm not making probes out of all my Nexi, or I'm supply blocked, I'm going to hold my breath. Now, I would recommend if you're struggling to hold your breath for as long as that takes, then maybe you have bigger issues to worry about than how to counter, like, I don't know, Marines. So let's see. I'm not supply blocked yet. I'll actually just stare. Just stare at the supply. Stare at the production tab. Probe. I should have been making probes there. Yeah, there are more advanced build orders as you get later on, and probably Diamond or Masters, I would say, at the earliest, that you maybe don't build probes at a certain time or something like that. No, that's probes and pylons. That's what we're worried about. Another thing is, did I take my Nexus when I had the minerals? Did I have 400 minerals and not take a Nexus? Was I microing my probe? You can go to your camera with the camera command over here. But these things, like, was my Nexus later than the last game? Stuff like that. But StarCraft is not about winning or losing. It's about beating yourself. And it doesn't matter if you lose 10 games in a row. If every single game you're making more workers, and you're getting more supply at an earlier time, and you're getting your upgrades quicker, eventually, you're going to win. If it takes 10 games, I lost almost 75 of my first 100 games. When I started out in the Silver League. Because everybody had played Brood War, all these super tryhards, or the beta, and I had no idea what I was doing. Alright, thank you. But you just keep playing. Of course, I'm going to recommend right now SC2ReplayStats.com. Makes it a lot easier. You can use the training center there. Before we get into anything, when you see me come out of this game, you'll see the stats from that game come up. Or they should, if it's not broken. But you can make it your life a lot easier if you're just starting out there. Alright, we're going to jump out of the game. Alright. I was a little bit high on the APM. 76, you don't need that. I could have done what I was doing with 50. I think if you can get to 50, and I think if you play builds that force you to play longer games and not just do an early cannon rush or an all-in, or something like that, then you're easily going to get 50 APM, even if you literally don't have hands. I have quite literally seen a Platinum Terran who didn't have hands. So you can do it. Alright. But and the things to worry about, make sure you're getting that pylon on time, that gateway on time, continually producing probes as well. And we got another Protoss versus Protoss. The only matchup, I do have a Protoss versus Zerg specific build guide if we don't actually get to it during this.
Good luck and have
but,
fun.
Against Zerg, you do want to wall off either the top of your ramp or the top of your secondary ramp. I think starting off with just the top of your main ramp is important. But that way you keep the Zerglings out. Against the other races, it's not nearly as important. And in fact, the wall can hurt you more than it hurts them, because both Protoss and Terran have strong ranged units, is the thing. Alright, so we're going to make that gateway immediately after the pylon. The pylon was on 14. And go scout with it. I like to just hotkey my gateway as well, hotkey my Nexus, hotkey my probe, Control 3, Control 4, Control 5. And lay that chrono, at least one chrono into probes. The chrono boost is pretty important to understand.
Yes. Just
Thank
as
you.
I deserve.
But the chrono boost allows you to produce 100% faster, twice as fast for 10 seconds. That's a big deal. That will really speed up the production of a unit, of your probes, And if you can get a handle on it, you'll have a big advantage over players who don't really understand how it works. Alright. Looks like he's finishing this up. We'll see. He has some of the same things I have here. I'm just looking. He's getting a cyber core, and you see that gateway lighting up? That means a zealot's in production. So, I'm going to get that second pylon back here. Remember, I want to have the ability to make a shield battery if I need it in my mineral line, just to keep those probes alive. They can even fight a zealot. They can fight zerglings. Probes become warriors when they have shields at their back. You never thought, like, SCVs have always been a strong fighting unit, but probes not so much. But now with the shield battery, probes become one of the best fighting units in your own mineral line. Alright, so we gotta recognize that he has 2 gas geysers. That means he has access to a lot of potential tech. But where is that probe going? Is he gonna make an expansion? He is. My turn.
Warping there is
okay.
Falling.
And I'm gonna queue up with the shift key. You can check out the guide to the shift key. It's very important to understand. It's super good. I think the shift key will make everyone's life easier who starts to use it. But we're going to bring this stalker across the map just to see if the zealot's coming across. That's it. And I'm going to make a robotics and chrono boost out the warp gate. This is finishing. We're going to get a shield battery. It has pretty long range. I set up my camera location. It has pretty long range. So you don't need to make it right at the top of the ramp. You can make it a little bit back. Of course, if you're trying to wall off, maybe it's a little different. We're gonna see. I'm gonna make another stalker. Okay, he has a stalker and a zealot. That's enough scouting for me. Remember, we're just trying to scout once every minute and a half. So I'm gonna make a couple more gateways. Having 3 gates in a robo on 2 bases gives you all the basics. All the basics. You get access to observers, so that way you can get detection. You have enough gateway units so you don't die to things. In general, 3 gates in a robo are the bread and butter. I'm going to transfer down some probes. Ideally, you only have 16 probes mining, but of course, if I didn't have another base, I would leave them mining over here. Remember, this is going to be a super pylon as well, which makes it easier for me to warp in. And actually, I'm going to warp in a sentry here. 2 or 3 sentries for Guardian Shield, which reduces all range damage in a bubble around you. And for Force Field, can be very useful. Gonna get another pylon at the back. I don't know what he's doing. I'm just gonna get a shield battery in my mineral line. This observer will stay at home. And I'm getting that next scouting information with my observer at the front. We're going to get a Twilight Council here. And I'm going to build an Immortal. Alright. Now, there are no units. Why are there no units? That's a great question. Oh, because they're up here. We can click on 2 robotics facilities. He's got a forge. It's a good reminder. I should get a forge. And there's nothing here. He's going for a lot of tech. He's getting a Twilight Council, but he has nothing yet. So, it's a bit of a bold move. But I'm just going to get a 3rd base. I don't have to think, how do I counter him? If he's building 2 big tech buildings, and he's getting 3 big tech buildings. He's getting his Twilight Council. He's getting hit 2 robotics facilities. So, he can't attack me while he's building all that. He hasn't yet gotten his return on investment. So I'm going to build, and we know he's going robo. He's not going for air units, robotics units. The only robo units that fly are the Observer and the War Prism. And they, for some reason, Blizzard, do not have an attack. Alright, so I can take this 3rd base, and if you can take a 3rd base before 6 minutes as Protoss when you're starting out, or just in general, as you get to the higher levels, it gets down to everything gets faster, is the summary. But 6 minutes as Protoss, if you start your 3rd, if you start an upgrade, if you got your Twilight Council spinning here, you're in pretty good shape. I'm hallucinating a Phoenix. Hallucination C, and then X for the Phoenix. You can choose from a wide array of units, but the Phoenix is the most obvious choice because it's super fast. It can get wherever you need it to go. I've got the shield batteries laid out here. The shield batteries can be at the back. They will heal cannons as well. Oh, speaking of cannons. Well, if he's building cannons, guess what he can't do? Build units! They cost money! Thank you, Slow Joe. And I'm gonna build a bunch of gates. As I'm getting a third base up is when I want this gateway explosion. Now, if maybe I'm going for a 2 base, I wanted those gates instead of a third base. But in general, your general rule is 2 bases can support 7 to 8 gates and a tech building. 3 bases can support 7 to 8 gates, a tech building, building probes, getting upgrades, all of that. If you're just gonna build a bunch of units and go all in, which I don't recommend, then you can do 7, 8 gates on just those 2 bases, but that's not your ideal choice. Now, as we get further into the game, I'm building cannons in my mineral line. These are for detection of Dark Templar, and maybe he does a little drop or something. But I'm building Immortals, and I'm going for the Archons. And this is against pretty much any race. There are some exceptions, like against a Zerg player who's maybe going really quickly for Mutalisks or something like that. You might need some Phoenixes or some Stalkers to counter. Archons are good, but they can't chase them down. Or against a Terran player who's going for a bunch of tanks and liberators. Actually, against a bunch of tanks, it's okay. Against a bunch of liberators, once again, you're going to need some more anti-air. But against any army that's mostly on the ground, you're pretty much good to go. With charge lots, the charge from the Twilight, the Archons, and the Immortals. Once I get to, what do I got, 5 Immortals? I think I'm good there. Once I get to 5 Immortals, I'm building a Warp Prism. Now I'm trying to build my army as strong as possible. And I'm looking to see if I can attack. So, some good timings to attack are when you have that +2 finishing. My opponent is trying to take a 3rd base. So if I can take a 4th base, well, he's trying to take a 3rd base because my 3rd base was already so much earlier. Well, that wouldn't hurt. Getting more pylons. It's good to have pylons around these bases right off the bat. That way you can get cannons and shield batteries set up. I'm hotkeying a Warp Prism. I'm going to send it towards the right side. So here's the plan. I'm going to put my army together. And I'm going to keep warping in now and all that. And then I'm going to, now here, I'm going to right-click my entire army, shift-click 1 Zealot, shift-tap, and then Control-1. And that re-hotkeys the entire army, and that 1 Zealot goes where I clicked it on the minimap. Easy peasy. And that's just my scout ahead. Make sure I don't die coming up there. Thank you. Welcome back. So, I'm going to get a couple more Archons, because Archons are my brawler unit. I want them in the fight. They get in front of everything. They get up in everyone's grill. They start a ruckus. They usually get some restraining orders. That's why they have so low range. But I've got all of these hotkeyed. We have 72 probes. That's great. Alright, that's good right there. We made it to 72. I've got a lot of Chrono Boost. We can just sink it in over here. Make some Immortals. We'll Chrono Boost out these gateways. So I can get another warp in pretty quick. I should get another couple pylons. And why not get a Dark Shrine? And why not get a Stargate? Because these are the things that I'm going to need. Like, if I don't kill him... Oh. Okay, now it's very important here. Alright, I'm going to do a crazy move. I'm going to use the recall. I'm going to recall this army, and it will pop out right here. Hands free, baby. You can use the mass recall at any nexus. Now, you got to be careful to use the nexus that you want to use it at.
Mineral field empty.
But if you do that, you can bring those units back. And now here's the nice thing when you're defending. The units appear instantly. When you use it on the units, they're stunned for the time, which is about 4 seconds. 4 seconds. They're stunned for that time. So you got to be careful. You can't just use it in a fight because you might use all your units.
Mineral field depleted.
But I'm gonna, as I'm moving my army across, I'm gonna transfer some probes to my next base because it's got fresh mining. We're gonna bring the warp prism in. Now, I got a lot of minerals banked up. That's not great. I need to try to get rid of those.
Your monthly dose of
I'm gonna warp in some
delta
DTs. My Dark Shrine just finished, and some Zealots. And we'll just attack here. Looks like his army's over here. Now we'll just get the warp prism out. Those are throwaway units. All right.
Mineral field empty. Send those workers.
That was just to get my army over here. Just a 1-2. Just making sure I'm not just jamming on the select all army. Hey, if we want to fight, I'm going to spread out a little. I'm going to pop some Guardian Shields, and I'll A-move. Now, I'm careful not to try to target anything down with this army. If you do that, you're liable to misclick and screw up your units. This is a very hands-free army. This is the automatic transmission of the Protoss, alright? No need to be too fancy. It's all about brute force. But we're able to just barrel through. And I think just some basic stuff. I mean, that's for everybody. That's not just for him. But basic Protoss. Don't go where you don't know. Alright, knowledge is power. Just the basics. But what that came down to is it's about just building up that economy. I see that you can't attack me. You have robotics facilities on the way. You're not building that many units, and I'm trying to keep some tabs. It's not important to be, what are you doing every single second? But is he building a bunch of units and attacking, or is he building multiple robotics facilities? Things like that. Just some very basic.
Your dedication will be rewarded.
Thank you. And now we got a Zerg. Now, most of the stuff I just talked about can be applied against Terran almost entirely. Against Terran, maybe you have to worry about a few more harass things. Maybe you want some more Stalkers early on because of Liberators and stuff like that. But against Zerg, I'm glad we got a Zerg, because it is pretty important to learn how to build a wall. That's the simple part. A lot of Zerg rushes... He was just trying to build a drone. A lot of Zerg rushes could be avoided if Protoss players were a little bit better architects. So I'm going to wall at the top of the ramp. There's a secondary option. You can go at the bottom of the ramp to try to take another base. But it's usually a little safer as long as you're not scared. So what I'm going to do here is a key point. I don't... And I'm putting a Chrono Boost right afterwards. I am not putting the pylon in the wall. This makes it very vulnerable. And it's very dangerous to put a pylon in your wall. Because it can die to banelings, it can just die to zerglings. It screws up the pathing. What you can do is a single gateway, or 2 gateways, and a cyber core right next to each other with a small gap, so a zealot on hold position or an adept on hold position can sit there and be essentially a soft wall. If a big amount of zerglings are coming, you can just build a pylon. But if they're not, now we see, does he have a hatchery? He has a hatchery a minute and a half into the game. So I don't need to worry about a bunch of zerglings right now, because he just started his spawning pool, and his lings can't go swimming for a while yet. So I can take a Nexus. It's a little greedy, yeah, a little, not a lot. And I can build... I actually built in the wrong spot. We're trying to lead by example here. You see right here, you can build a Zealot potentially and put it on hold position with that hold position button, or H by default. But I'm actually going to start to try to wall off this area on the low ground. It's important to work my way there as time goes on. Now we see he has a gas geyser. He has that spawning pool as well. He's scouting with a drone. I'm getting a second gas geyser.
You must construct.
That's to be able to get some tech out, but we're just going to be going for the basics. I'm going to get an Adept early. An Adept is pretty good, as opposed to a Stalker or a Zealot, because it kills Zerglings effectively, and it's pretty cheap as well. It's only 125. I'm going to get a robotics facility at the front, and I'm going to get a gateway next to it, and just to be safe, we're going to chrono boost Warp Gate. We're not going to chrono boost probes, we're just going to be consistently making them. But I'm working on walling this off. He's going to have that spawning pool done soon. And now I'm going to get a shield battery at the front. You can use the shield battery to wall off, but it's a little bit better to use the shield battery behind, so it can't be killed, and so it can heal up. Now, this is a map with a pretty big wall area, so you have to make a decision. Do you want to worry about Zerglings coming around anywhere? I don't. I don't want to worry about Zerglings anywhere, so I'm just going to wall this area off. That's a hard wall right there. Usually you wouldn't do that, because most maps only have this area. But in this case, I will. So that way, the only place Zerglings can come in is back here. Now, there was a drone back there, wasn't there? Gonna keep chrono boosting that warp gate. This Adept is on hold position, and I've built a wall. Where did you go, drone? Where did he go? Does anybody know where the drone went? Did he disappear? I was not paying attention.
Research complete.
Shows how much I know.
Timing push.
But I'm gonna get those warp gates. I've gotten an observer, so I can see anything coming across. I'm just gonna bring this probe again. Oh, he has another base. That's really important to see. So what that means, I'm going to get a Twilight Council, and I'm going to get another base. I don't have to be worried about, I need to attack that right now. No, 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 no. Let him figure it out. Alright, you're the Protoss. If you build a nice wall and several sentries for Force Field, you got to get the hang of Force Field, but once you do, you're going to foil a lot of Zerg shenanigans. You see some creep spread. I'm going to go into the main with the Observer. So the goal here, we're still going to build those Immortals, those Charge Lots, and those Archons. Now, of course, if they build things like Mutalisks, well, we see Evolution Chambers, we see a Roach Warren. I'm going to go for, you know what, we're going to go for Blink Stalkers here. Now, that's just to make sure my Stalkers can get into a good position. They're not used to attack, they're used to make sure my Stalkers don't die very easy. And I'm going to get a Forge here. I want to start that before the 6-minute mark. Get a couple shield batteries, and the walling doesn't stop here. Alright. I'm getting the Stalkers because they're good against roaches. And in case later on he goes for things like Mutalisks, I want to be careful. They can work with my wall-ins here very well as well. I have this Observer to see if he attacks me this way. And I'm going to keep making probes. Remember, we're going for 50 probes by 8 minutes. I've gotten there at 6 minutes. You can get there quicker if you're really on point. Challenge yourself. I start that upgrade. I'm going to put all my chrono in there. Now, looking around, you see he doesn't have that many workers at this base. You shouldn't be looking too much in detail. It's not that big a deal whether or not he does. But that means he might make a bunch of units. Oh, he killed my Observer. Now what you can do is use the hallucinations on the sentry to just get a beat on what he's doing. And I got supply blocked. What a noob. Gonna build the pylons around the edge. I should have had a pylon or two in the main as well. This was a mistake. Because then I can make a shield battery and then maybe cannons eventually. I don't want to make all pylons, but having a lot of them is important. Alright, now I'm going to get that Templar Archives. There's no set time. It's usually when you start banking up gas. I'm not sure what he means. And I'm actually, you don't know where he is, get a pylon out here. He's got an Overseer. I mean, that's not a huge deal. Getting charged to follow up, there's no reason not to. And I should have more gateways, so I'm going to be adding more gates on. We're going to transfer some probes down here.
Upgrade complete.
Alright, I honestly couldn't tell you what he's up to. But we're going to chrono boost these things. I don't know if he wants to fight 1v1 mid ARAM or something. But I'm going to get a cannon near each base. When we're getting to this stage in the game, 100 supply. I might be looking at another base. We're going to get Storm. Storm probably sees the most use against Zerg, but it's very popular against Terran too. I mean, it does a ton of damage. Now, importantly, Storm does not stack. Now, I usually wouldn't... This wouldn't be my first choice for a 4th base. Just to point out, sometimes there are bases like this. It only has 4 mineral patches. But gas geysers are really nice for a Protoss. So.
Warping there is strictly prohibited.
Because so many of your units are so high-tech. They're so fancy. Alright. They're high maintenance. That's a big part of playing Protoss is I have a hotkey for my army. My main army, my ground units. You gotta understand how the units work. Like, my sentry takes casting priority. If I select this hotkey, and it doesn't have any Templar, then it selects my sentries. But if I add the Templar in, it selects my Templar, and that makes it harder to control my Templar and my sentries. You can use something called the tab hotkey to switch between types of units, you can see here, to be able to switch. But I like to just put my Templar on a separate hotkey to get rid of that confusion. Or being more stalkers. This is about that time. I've got 4 or 5 immortals. And I want to get... Yeah, we'll get some more gates. Get a dark shrine. I'm going to send out 2 hallucinated phoenixes because I'm looking for his army right now. When it gets to this stage of the game, he could have a very big army, and if I'm out of position, that could be very bad. Alright, we see he has Mutalisks, he has Corruptors. It's not a huge deal, but that means I'm going to get some more cannons in these bases. Maybe a couple shield batteries to go along with them because they're cheaper. Because he could be hitting my mineral lines, and that's very annoying. So I'm going to get some Archons with my main army as well.
Free to play.
Archons!
Still have the means
Thank
and
you, Ken.
motivation. Love the stream.
I just don't enjoy it. But I'm going to get Archons, which means Mutas essentially can't fight against Archons. They just can't. They get, as the Archons would say, obliterated. Oh, there come the Mutas. And I can control-click the Stalkers and use it to blink. Maybe pick off another Muta. Oh no! I'll warp Prism. But we'll warp in some Zealots here. I already have enough anti-air. You can't be lulled into the sense, I only need anti-air, because then he makes a ton of Zerglings and Hydralisks and just kills you. I lost my Warp Prism, but I think it's about time to attack. Get another upgrade. Gonna get another Warp Prism. I'm using my camera locations. Once again, you can check the quick guide on that. How to set them up and how to use them to flip between my bases. We check the probe count in the top right. 71. I could use a few more. It's good.
A mineral patch just went
70 to 75 is good to go, essentially. But here, I've got my Templar on that 3 hotkey. I've got my army on that 1 hotkey. I'm going to A-click and then split off a couple Zealots with the Shift key. I'm going to use a couple Hallucinated Phoenixes using the Control click to just select them.
We shall stay embrace the dolores.
And now here's something for all races. Okay, we see the army. I'm going to go attack it. But this, just before, I would usually be attacking right now. I just want to demonstrate this. Is if you have idle workers, and they show up over here, idle workers, they're just sitting around doing nothing, and you want to send them somewhere, you press Control to select all of a certain type of unit, and F1, which is the default, or whatever you have it bound to, and it selects all your idle workers, and you can send them where you want them to go. Alright. Moving into attack. Gonna make sure I have my Templar with the army.
Send those workers to a new base.
We can storm. We can storm this side as well. Use the Guardian shields. But ideally, you micro as little as possible. Now, armies with a lot of mutas do take some storms, but having those Archons in the front really soak up the damage so you can get in position to use the storms. Now, before I go out again, we'll get another warp in. But that just broke down. Now, it's a very defensive map. On other maps, you gotta kind of adapt. I do, in this current season as I'm making this guide, there's always gonna be maps like this, though. Battle on the Boardwalk is a map, it's a very quick rush map. So you can veto maps with the map vetoes command. If you don't want to try that out, I don't blame you. It's good to get used to it, but that's the basics there. Is just learning to get an expansion as Protoss. I think that's a big deal. It's actually better to expand earlier as a Protoss than later. Because if you're getting a Nexus later, it has less HP, it doesn't have pylons around it, doesn't have shield batteries. Even if you have a few more units, it's better to have that Nexus at full HP, to have those shield batteries set up. And if you're having trouble, more shield batteries earlier. That's the summary. Charge your batteries. Alright, it's like playing Game Boy in the car. You think you have enough to get there? Guess what? You're running out, you're almost all the way through Pokemon Yellow, but you ran out of batteries, and then you get batteries at the gas station, you plug them in, and your save file got corrupted, and you gotta start from the beginning. Now, in this case, you would just have more batteries that with longer charge. The analogy doesn't work perfectly. Alright, not 100% perfectly, but you get the idea. If you need more defense at a certain base, shield batteries. Immortal Charge Lot Archon or Immortal Stalker Archon is your basic unit composition. You can use Colossi, you got Templar, you got Carriers, you got that late game. But just focusing on that basic building probes, building pylons, building Nexi is the summary. And just to reiterate once again, because I think this is a very useful skill to have, we had some questions about it, I will demonstrate just a few little tricks that I think everybody should know. Now, if you look at my guides on the camera location hotkeys and the shift key and the control key and ASCII and all that, of course, but in order to split off units from the army to scout, or if you get a little bit faster, you can split off. Now, Control 1. This is my entire army on Control 1. Say I want to send off some zealots to hit another base. Now, I'm a little bit further back. I'm going to right-click or A-click over here. I'm going to select those zealots. Shift-click, click, 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 click. And then it'll remove the unit selection. And then I'm going to press Control 1, and those units are gone. And then, once again, I mean, you can do it on the screen. Click, 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 click. I missed one. It's a little bit less reliable if you do it on the screen there. And now, a good usage for the Select All Army hotkey. I don't recommend trying to use it for every game, but if you hit the Select All Army hotkey, you can also control-click, for example, all your Templar. You can control-click them and then press, say, Control 3.
I heed the call. Thus I serve.
Upgrade complete.
And then they're on that hotkey. Now, just setting up your buildings, this is a pretty good setup. It's not great, but the idea is to make it more difficult for their units to attack you. Now, against Terran and Protoss, you don't really want to have the gateways necessarily in front of you because they can use them against you. So, more of the time you're making your gateways in your main, but against Zerg, you're building these walls and laying down the shield batteries in positions that Zerglings and Roaches can't get into. That's the summary. Now, I know there'll be a lot of questions. You can leave questions in the comments. Of course, I have dozens of games of Protoss as well. But hopefully this gets you started on Protoss and, well, how it'll be in 2018 and beyond. And if there's updates to it in the future, well, I'll make more guides. But thank you for watching. Good luck, have fun, and happy StarCrafting.
Mineral field depleted.
And then I gotta